with many of you here. So I want to wish you all a very good morning, and we'll wait for a few of you to come in here while I just set up. Right now we are live streaming, just doing my time tracking here, and so good morning. Oh, last thing I gotta do is TikTok. I'm banned from TikTok Live or something. I said a bad word that. Your live is okay. There you go. See, I can't do. Okay, whatever. We'll do a little bit of. They're going to be banned in the year, within the year anyway, so I don't really care. Ryan C7, what's up? Megan, good morning. Good morning, everybody on Locals. Yana, I appreciate it. It's good to see you. And Cole Callahan, how are you? Irene, good morning, everybody. Okay, I'm going to get started as people are starting to make their way in here. 1 second. And good news. There's always good news. That's the good news. There's always good news. There's always good things happening, except my heater's on and it's so hot in here I'm going to die if that continues. Good morning, Jesse. This week I'm going to talk a little bit about where I was over the past few days. It was really quite fascinating, and again, more good news to go around. And hold on, let me just stop this and start. So if you can, like, share, and subscribe. For those of you who are watching either on Facebook or on YouTube or on Locals here on Honking for Freedom, I appreciate all of you, and you're all very awesome. You know what I realized? I never, all this time that over the past, couple of years, I've been meeting a lot of people who are famous, have big platforms, however you want to describe them. I'm never taking pictures with them. Like, never. And everybody asks me, like, why didn't you take a picture with them? I'm like, I don't know. It's kind of like lowbrow a little bit. I don't know. So I promised a bunch of people to start taking pictures with people, which is what I've done while I was in Boston. And I took a couple of pictures with Greg Foss, for those of you who know who he is, and Jason Lowry, who I'm going to talk about in a little bit. And I will try to change that, but, I always forget. Like, the last thing that pops on into my head is to take a picture with somebody. It's just kind of, I don't know. Maybe it's a generational thing. So if you're on Locals, follow along, honkingforfreedom.locals.com, YouTube. It's youtube.com/BJD, my initials online, one word. And I can't live stream to TikTok anymore because, we know how TikTok likes to control the narrative, right? It's wholesome content in China, and it's nothing but degeneracy in the West, which is why this app is doomed to be banned eventually. Anyways, if you're on there, come join us on YouTube or Locals. All right, let me just save that and send that off. So if you can, next, fine. I don't want to hear myself. Go ahead. All right. So, of course, now all the other TikTok stuff starts. Okay, great. D2, good morning. Is it still morning there? I guess it is, because D2 is in Prince Edward Island, the very beautiful Prince Edward Island, as I've heard about numerously. Cole says, I never take pictures of anything. I always forget. Yeah, it's the same thing. And the thing is, like, you're engaged in a conversation with somebody. Often I'm with somebody who I'm learning from, who, I've taken a lot from their presentation. The last thing I'm thinking about is, myself in a picture, right? So I guess you can understand. So this week, if I seem low energy, like I'm exhausted, I slept, I don't know, just a couple of hours before driving back, and the night before, I only slept for 3 hours. Just had a lot of work to do. I was in the middle of Massachusetts, and I didn't get there until late at like 1 in the morning, and they started offloading me and I had 3 different drops and a pickup, so it was long. it was pretty long, and I didn't sleep very much. So if I seem down on energy today, you'll know exactly why. And Jesse says TikTok can't go soon enough. Yeah, it'll be banned eventually, just because they're just a little too politically partisan towards, I don't know, communism, and I think that's going to be their eventual downfall. But more on that to come in the near future. So I've had a bunch of you on here asking me to talk about Bitcoin. Now, calm down. We're not going to do a Bitcoin lesson or a Bitcoin tutorial today. I'm just going to mention something in passing to try to give a little bit of framing and context to Bitcoin that might help you, and just kind of leave it at that. And I know there's a number of you that want, specific tutorials, instructions. We'll be doing that in Twitter Spaces in the near future. DJ Satoshi, who was there this weekend, and a few others cover this on a regular basis, and I'll help a bunch of you and show you hot wallets, cold wallets, all that sort of stuff when you're ready, when there's enough people who want to know about it, but I'm not going to talk about it too much. So, D says, I believe this is expected in February. What's expected in February? The banning of TikTok? I mean, that would be amazing. That would be absolutely amazing. And you know what's going to happen? Everybody who's freaking out on TikTok, you'll just move over to Instagram, right? And as bad as Facebook, Meta, whatever you want to call it is, as bad as it is, it's not the Chinese Communist Party, right? It's close. It's really close. But it's still not quite the Chinese Communist Party. So everybody's got a place that they'll go. Plus, I think you'll see some of the other alternative platforms will have an investment into short-form content and whatever. Oh, the response to the inquiry? All right, so can I make my prediction? Can I make my prediction now? Truckers bad, government bad, don't do it again. Here's recommendations for the future. Now, I could be wrong. But that's how politics works in Canada, and this was heavily politicized. And but I'm going to talk about that towards the end a little bit. First, I want to get on to Boston, which was absolutely fascinating. So I was invited to go down to meet with a group of people who hosted me to speak in November. And they invited Jason Lowry to be the speaker this week. Oh, look at this. Yana, perfect. I need to set up my cold wallet. Look at you. You're like 10 levels above everybody else, Yana, but that's awesome. What kind of cold wallet did you get? Let me know in there. So I went down to this group. It's called Mass Adoption. They're on Twitter, BTC_MASS, like Massachusetts. Great guys who run it. Foss has been a supporter of theirs. Booth is a supporter of theirs. They're really doing a lot of on-the-ground educational work. They're having events together. They may be hosting a music festival in the summer, which they've asked me to. I don't know. I'm going to talk to them, see how they want me to participate and help out and all that sort of stuff, which I may or may not. It just depends on my schedule. All right, so they hosted Jason Lowry. Now, you're all saying, who is Jason Lowry? Jason Lowry is an exceptionally bright young man. He's been in the U.S. Air Force and for, I think, 8 years, he said. And then he was transferred over to the Space Force. And he's now gone back to MIT to write his thesis. I didn't ask him if he is a computer scientist. I imagine he is. By the degree of knowledge that he has and what he was communicating there. But anyways, he's gained some prominence. He's met with DOD, the Department of Defense in the United States, numerous times on Bitcoin. And he has also been recently met at the White House. He is a military person, which means he's politically nonpartisan. So we don't have to get into the, Biden. Everybody knows Biden's a fool. I would never know his opinion anyways, since he is an active service member, and I respect that, right? His goal is he just wants to, whoever is in office, it doesn't matter, needs to understand kind of these issues around Bitcoin sovereignty, all that sort of stuff. Anyways, Jason presented his thesis that he's working on within, I don't know how long it was, 45 minutes maybe. I recorded it in a Twitter space, and you can go to my Twitter feed, click on it, and you can listen to it. it was really fascinating. It was maybe above the head of many people, but I think the general theme is pretty much is easy to understand. It's just it's how you lay it out and the evidence that gets you to that thesis that might be a little bit confusing for a lot of people. I've been fortunate enough to have grown up with a computer since I was 3 years old, and understand basics of programming as a kid, and logic gates and transistors and how it all works and how computational power functions. And because if you got into computers in 1980, or when I first got my first computer, I think we got in 79, and I really started delving deep into it maybe 82ish. If you got into here we go, Apple II, Gen Z Apple II, perfect. So if you kind of grew up in that sphere a little bit, you didn't have to be a computer scientist to see how the technology was evolving, because you'd have to understand it as things migrated from the Commodore operating system into eventually DOS and all that sort of. So anyways, I've been fortunate enough to be exposed to that, having friends who studied computer science in university. So for me, it was easy to understand. Yeah, obviously you could talk circles around me, but the general gist of the evidence that he's laying out, I got. It was and it was absolutely fascinating. So I'm trying to figure out the best way to explain the crux of his thesis on Bitcoin, and it's really fascinating what he's trying to explain. And he's trying to explain this to governments. Again, any government in his office, it doesn't really matter, right? He's trying to explain that the financial layer of Bitcoin is just one step. It's just one aspect of it. And this is why it's so important for all of us, that what Bitcoin is it's essentially a new internet is what it is. It's the foundation of a decentralized internet, right? And he goes into this theory of war and shows why it's relevant to it. And I really liked this explanation and analogy. He's one of those people, you meet these people. Jordan Peterson's a good example of this. There's many others. I often talk about Gad Saad is great at this when he gives his presentations. Stephen, when we do our podcasts. Many other people like that. Douglas Murray is a good example of this as well. There are people who, Scott Adams, there are people who take our conceptual ideas that we really can't articulate it really well, and they articulate it into a very simple form, which is something that I try to do, but I am nowhere near that level, and I doubt I will ever be anywhere near that level. But it's something that I aspire to do because I've seen so many of these successful people do it. And that's what communications and marketing is, right? So he explains that why warfare is, firstly, it's not always a negative, and for a number of reasons. And that's beyond just, saving human rights and all that. He's not trying to take that argument. He's trying to take the military argument, which is, and I like this analogy. He said, when you look at the world, and we've all seen these satellite maps of the world overnight, and you see the electrical grids and all that sort of stuff, you don't see a territory that says, Russia, or a territory that says China or whatever. You just see one, multiple land masses. Because the labeling is all artificial. All the lines that we draw, the borders, those are all artificial. And this is not an open borders argument. This is, in fact, the exact opposite of that. What he's explaining, and I was thinking back to James Burke's series, was it Connections 1? Yeah, I think it was the first episode of Connections, where he explains that the reason the United States has nuclear arsenals to protect their belief system, the belief system in the United States perspective is their constitution. Okay, fine. Well, every country has its own different, or every society has its own different belief system. And that's what warfare does. It guarantees decentralization of the planet. It guarantees that there will be a line between various countries around the world, and no individual country or entity will ever control everybody, that there's always options. There's always different societies that have different belief systems, whether you agree with them or not, That's what warfare guarantees us. It's the ability to protect our belief system, okay? And that is something that is decentralized. Again, not one entity, not one God King is controlling the world like it used to be during the era of empires that only finally ended in the 1800s, right? So now we have the digitization of this process. And the digitization of this process is in Bitcoin, is in building this decentralized digital network, if you will, that everybody can participate in. And these are not his words, right? These are my interpretations, and I'm expanding upon it. That everybody can participate in the network, where in the analog world that would be landmass, in the digital world that's information, and that no single entity, no God King, no single government controls it, right? Everybody has access to it, but nobody controls it. And that is what allows us to be free and to have options around the world. It's really quite fascinating. And what he's getting to is, and this is what he tries to explain to governments, that this is where we get into, you're going to hear these two terms frequently. Proof of work and proof of stake, which is the whole basis of where he started with this thesis. For those of you who are new to Bitcoin, you're going to hear proof of stake versus proof of work. Proof of work is Bitcoin. Proof of stake is all these other, coins that are basically, they take the code and they copy Bitcoin and they just put it on their own centralized computer, their own centralized network. That's why they're completely different. Bitcoin's the only one that is still completely decentralized. Everything else is just, it's like going to a corporation who's copied Bitcoin and put it on their server. Well, who wants that, right? And it's fascinating that it shows where we're going with all of this, that when we have this philosophical divide between proof of stake and proof of work, this is kind of the division that we're dealing with today in our society of, the political class versus the rest of us, and the rest of us who are fed up with it. That's kind of that's the comparison that I see. And so let me kind of explain basically, when they talk about from a messaging standpoint, when you hear proof of stake and proof of work is, again, Bitcoin, decentralized, nobody controls it. Trying to ban Bitcoin would be like trying to ban, I don't know, coronavirus or something like that, or a virus, whatever. But proof of stake, that's what we have right now in our world. That's what we're living in. We're living in proof of stake within our political system. Proof of stake allows a small group of people who have the vast majority of coins on whatever their network is. And when things come to a vote for consensus, they basically control the outcomes, right? In our world, that's what we have. We have a small group of entities, corporations, individuals, not all of whom are evil, by the way. I shouldn't even say any, anyways, let's not project people's belief systems. But you have this small group of individuals, people in the political class, that they have the vast majority of coins in our system. It's dollars, fiat dollars. And based on their idea of where things can need to move forward in society, they can rig consensus in their favor. And that's why Bitcoin is different, and proof of stake, when you hear that term all the time, that's why it's lethal. That's why for Bitcoiners, it's a non-starter, because that's exactly the system that we live in today. And you see so much manipulation in our system. That's why you see all these proxy organizations that parrot, what the political class does to try to manipulate you and all that sort of stuff. So this is a fundamental thing to understand about Bitcoin. Forget the money first. And by the way, these are I'm just playing off what Jason Lowery's presentation was alluding to. So you really should listen to his presentation. But before we get into, Bitcoin as money is the first layer of what Bitcoin is. There's going to be many layers on top of it that are completely distinct and will have completely different functions. The money part, that's just the financial aspect of what the Bitcoin proof of work network can give to the world. And he actually finishes in his thesis and he explains to governments around the world the reason this is important is if you want to revolutionize and update our electrical grid around the world, get the Bitcoiners on it. Because once the Bitcoiners are focused on the electrical grid, what do? They try to make systems like computer systems, not Bitcoin. Bitcoin, we want it to be slow intentionally, that's a conversation for another day. But in terms of circuitry, and when it comes to silicon processors, they're always trying to make it faster and faster and faster. That's what Moore's law is, as he explains. Well, Bitcoin will allow governments to exploit the people in the tech sector and Moore's law to invest all that energy into the electrical grid around the world. And you'll see this golden age of competition amongst countries around the world trying to show that they have the most advanced electrical grid around the planet. That's what we're going to end up with. And that is going to make the world so much better. For a whole bunch of reasons. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. But anyways, that's kind of my thoughts. In addition to Jason Lowry's presentation, I'm kind of mixing in some of his ideas in there too. But it was really fascinating to hear that sort of intellectual honesty from somebody who is clearly working within the government system. And as we discussed, between the two of us, we know there are good people in governments and there are bad people in governments. And the problem is, who fails up, right? In our system, all the lunatics fail up, and all the good people are sitting in the middle or below saying, what is going on around me, And there's a lot of that happens. I mean, he didn't tell me that that's his experience, but that's kind of the experience of people I know who work in government. So we do have allies in government as well. There's so many. All of these are really good things to be thankful for and optimistic for. And this is one of the many reasons I see, like his presentation yesterday was just, boom, another data point on how we're entering the golden age and how things are going to become so much better. There's going to be bumps in the road, like what's going on in Brazil right now, which we'll talk about in a second. But overall, if you take the long-term view, things are going to end up much better for all of us and society. We just gotta, we gotta be able to endure the stress and those bumps on the road and focus on all the good stories and the good things that have happened. And speaking of good stories and good things that happened, I gave Jason a copy of this the other night. Just a reminder, honkingforfreedom.com. We need to share those good stories with people, and we cannot stop. This is what will help people pull themselves out of the echo chamber, utilizing tools like this and promoting tools like this. And there are others, but anyways. Maddie, hello, fellow freedom fighters. What's up, brother? Brazil plus Bitcoin plus freedom. Agreed. Is PP still supporting Bitcoin? Pierre Polyev. I don't know. It's funny. I've mentioned that to some people. People ask me all the time about Pierre Polyev, and Pierre is a politician like anybody else. And I think it's not Pierre that's the problem necessarily. I think it's the political apparatus. It's the party around him, which is a massive problem. That party is a massive, massive problem. And we'll get into that a little bit. Over the next few months, you're probably going to see a lot more evidence of that from what I understand. But I've told people in the Bitcoin world that I've been, loosely involved in this game with our political class for many, many years now, and I understand how they all operate, which is why I was able to help make the Convoy successful through our messaging, because I understood when we were going to be set up, when we weren't going to be set up, how to control the messaging and all that sort of stuff. Not control the messaging, but how to sell the messaging of what we were really there for. I don't like to control stuff. But anyways, So I try to explain to people in the Bitcoin world who are all excited about Pierre Poilievre that Pierre is not the problem. It's the party that's the problem. And if he's not saying Bitcoin leading up into an election, then he's never going to do anything on Bitcoin. And I've been through this before with this party. What they do, this is a strategy. What they do is if you are what they call, I hate this word, they call them stakeholders. You hear Klaus Schwab say that term all the time. Well, the Conservative Party uses the same terminology. So what they do is they'll say to their stakeholder, in this case, the Bitcoiners are a stakeholder, they'll say, yeah, we're on board. We're on board with you. We're going to do something with Bitcoin. I'm not sure yet, but we're going to do something. But I can't mention it now because if I mention it now, that is going to negatively affect me in the polls, and then we'll be stuck with Justin Trudeau, and I'll never be able to get into office, right? So I'm there with you. I'm just not going to say anything. This is total bullshit when they do this. They're gaming you, and they're playing you, and they're lying to your face when they say that. Because what happens is when they get into office, then they shift and say, you know what, love Bitcoin, supportive of it, whatever, it's great, but it wasn't part of our policy platform. It's not one of the promises we made, so we got to focus on all the things we promised first, and then we'll get to Bitcoin. Well, how many governments get through all of the promises that they said leading up to an election? They focus on one or two, and then they just delete everything else, which is what they'll do to Bitcoin. And then what they'll say is, you know what? We couldn't get into it our first term, but the next term, now we'll be able to do it. Because we got a whole bunch of stuff first. We lined up the runway for you. We're going to do it. We'll deal with Bitcoin after, but we'll do it after the next election. So just support us in the next election. We're not going to say anything, but we'll do it after the next election. And then guess what happens after the next election? That's how these political parties work, right? Unless you have a lobby firm walking in with piles of cash for donations for ridings and a team of volunteers on the ground for the various ridings that they haven't negotiated away with the other political parties, which is also what they do, then they're just never going to do it. So I caution Bitcoiners and say, you need to put the pressure on now. Now, it's going to be a little easier for Pierre to become more open about Bitcoin when we go into the next bull rally. So I think he would be more amicable to commenting on that and talking about Bitcoin as well. So I'm not completely unsympathetic to the position that the political class is in on this subject, because I can understand how they look at the voting base and how the voting base operates, which sometimes we're not a pleasure either. I gotta be honest, we're kind of a pain in the ass. But I think if you start to see another bull run moving forward, then it'll be a lot easier for them to say, okay, well, I can't get hammered with Trudeau. And also, they're horrible at messaging. Like, they're so bad. They're so bad. I've given up on trying to help them because they're just so incompetent. Because it's such an ancestral relationship and a revolving door of idiots. So I have no interest in helping them anymore. But if they were anywhere effective in their messaging, they could have exploited the attacks from Trudeau, showing that Bitcoin was at $400 before he came into office, and moved forward. You can do that without becoming, quote, the Bitcoin party, but they're just too incompetent to do it. So anyways, but we hit another bull run. I think they'll be more amicable to speaking openly on Bitcoin. But if you're a Bitcoiner and you're supporting this, then you need to put the pressure on now. You don't put the pressure on after they hit the election. All right, a couple of comments. So many comments. Oh, wow. All right, I got a whole long list. I'm no DJ Productions. I always love your username, brother. Bitcoin network uses 56 times less energy than the financial system. Yeah, because Bitcoin doesn't have the Bank of Montreal tower or the Scotiabank tower and all these skyscrapers around the world and these central banks and printers and all these people. It's just a computer program. So I mean, it's a computer program that's run on a bunch of decentralized servers / miners. It's miners and nodes. I mean, you don't have to have too many functioning brain cells to realize that a skyscraper uses a lot more energy than a few computers. Like, it's just crazy. So, but people will believe anything. Right, I believe expect. Okay, so good morning, Bridget. Good morning, Jesse. Kanan, good morning. Everybody's talking about. Okay, so you're talking about Anderson. That's a whole other can of worms. I want to pivot over to Brazil for a second. Good morning, Beth. Beth, you're usually the first one to say good morning, and you're late on my 100th. This is the 100th live stream. I love you dearly. I thought you would be there, but, maybe tomorrow, right? Okay, so, Yana has a cold wallet. I have no clue how to use a cold wallet, really. I have a couple of hardware wallets, and I just got a Foundation Passport, which is similar to Cold Wallet. From what I understand, they used a lot of the open source code from Cold Card to build the Foundation wallet. So I'm going to be experimenting with it probably over the weekend, Yana. So if I figure it out, I will let you know. So, all right. I want to pivot over to Brazil for a second. Brazil is important because, in my opinion, remember I said we're heading into a golden age, but we're going to have quite a few bumps in the road. And I think Brazil and the Canadian Freedom Convoy and a number of these issues are kind of the bumps in the road that we can expect. And I want to, and we're going to be doing a space, Dave-O and I are going to be doing a space on Brazil sometime in the next couple of days, because it's really, it's kind of crazy what's going on there. Did I just close it? Oh, no, here we go. So Glenn Greenwald, who famously really don't like his political opinions, but I do love, he's changing. It's changing as we're all getting away from this left-right divide ecosystem, and it's becoming, the political authoritarians versus everybody else who has a bunch of different opinions. So he's a free speech absolutist, which I appreciate. He's in Brazil, and he's been commenting quite a lot on Brazil. And the reason Brazil is important, the fourth largest democracy in the world and one of the largest economies in the Western world, as he explains that what we're seeing in Brazil is what's coming here. And we saw elements of that with the trucker convoy. Boy, did some of us truckers not realize the hornet's nest we we hit with our convoy. And famously, for people who know, they had a trucking convoy after the Brazilian elections with Bolsonaro, which was clearly unconvincing, shall we say. The results were unconvincing. And that's caused people to just lose their minds. And because, once again, they see that they interpret their country as being stolen from them by the political class, and they wanted to push back, so they had a convoy. Apparently, it's all over the country. So what did the Brazilian government do? Imagine, you're the government of Brazil, you have convoys all over the country, and what can you do to put an end to this? Well, you look to Prime Minister Blackface, the most racist person to hold office in Canadian history, and what he did to the truckers without due process and froze their bank accounts, and you do the same. So the truckers in Brazil had their bank accounts frozen. So, okay, you guys talk, I'll get to the comments, sorry. So I have this little excerpt from Glenn Greenwald. I want to play it for, I don't know, a minute or so. I don't know how long it's going to be, but not too long. But understand that this is what's going on here. And this is not cause for anxiety and to be upset. This is just the game, right? This is just the way it is and what we have to navigate. And this is why we need to reach out to our friends and neighbors who may disagree with us politically. They may be on a different area, a different end of the political spectrum, but we need to stop demonizing them and we need to start working with them, right? So, because a lot of this is things that doesn't matter where you are in the political spectrum, as an individual citizen, you would agree or you would support. All right, so let me get over here and I'm going to start playing just a little excerpt from one of the many reports Glenn Greenwald has done. And for those of you who are on, on Locals, you're going to hear it. You don't really need to see it. It's just Glenn Greenwald talking. So it's, again, hopefully Locals at some point does an RMTP setting, but I'm not sure how it works. All right, here we go.
Now, I can tell you for a fact that this judge, Alexandre de Moraes, used to be hated by the Brazilian left. And the reason is because in 2016, the left-wing president of Brazil, Dilma Rousseff, was impeached by the Congress, and that impeachment was upheld by the Supreme Court. I was vehemently opposed to that impeachment at the time. In fact, I created the Brazilian version of The Intercept primarily to give space to the dissent against that impeachment because the entire establishment was united behind it. And the government that replaced her was viewed as, by the Brazilian left, as a coup government, an illegitimate government. Alexandre de Moraes was the justice minister in this coup government, and he ended up on the Supreme Court because he was appointed by what the Brazilian left considered the coup leader, Michel Temer, an illegitimate president, to this court. So they hated him forever. He was also a major advocate of the anti-corruption probe that led to the imprisonment of Lula da Silva. So the Brazilian left hated him until he took on the role of chief censor and began censoring apparently almost everybody who the Brazilian left regards as their enemy.
So we talk often about censorship from the government in Canada and their, official sources, the CBC or whatever. Anyways, we're going to go on. You'll understand why this becomes relevant in a minute.
Especially Bolsonaro supporters, including ordering members of Congress arrested and journalists having their homes searched and seized. And now he's a hero to the Brazilian left. In fact, earlier this week on Twitter, I questioned whether or not his powers have become too excessive, just like the New York Times did here. And I trended on Brazil on Twitter for 2 days, being accused of being a defender of terrorists, meaning the people who invaded those buildings. Does that sound familiar to you? If you're an American, it should. After 9/11, the climate was created that anyone who questioned what Bush and Cheney were doing in the name of protecting us from the terrorists themselves was a sympathizer of Al-Qaeda or was pro-terrorist. That's the climate that exists now in Brazil.
I'm not sure I would use that analogy, but I'm getting to his point is sound, but he'll get somewhere with it. Keep going.
If you question this judge, you will be called a defender of fascism, even though what this judge is most known for is this very extreme censorship regime that was even a bridge too far for the New York Times right before the election. Let's look at what the New York Times said.
Sound familiar? So if you oppose the regime, you oppose the people who have all the power, then you get the T word. You get labeled by them. Weren't the truckers labeled something by Prime Minister Blackface, the most racist person to hold office in Canadian history? I don't know. Sounds familiar. Anyways, keep going.
It's really quite alarming what even the Times said about what this judge was doing. Quote, the Times described a WhatsApp conversation among businessmen who supported Bolsonaro, and they were pondering whether it would be better for the country if Bolsonaro lost, if the military intervened in order to overturn the election. They were having a discussion about whether that would be a good thing. That conversation leaked, and then this is what happened. Quote, what followed was perhaps even more alarming than that WhatsApp conversation, says the New York Times, for the world's fourth largest democracy. Federal agents raided the homes of the 8 businessmen. The authorities froze their bank accounts, subpoenaed their financial, phone, and digital records.
Freezing bank accounts, right? Sound familiar? Where did that come from? Where did that famously happen? We're almost done.
And told social networks to suspend some of their accounts. The order came from one judge, Alessandro de Moraes, the same judge who just issued that order I read you. The only evidence it cited was the WhatsApp group message, which had been leaked to a journalist. In these messages, only 2 of the 8 businessmen had suggested they supported a coup. It was a raw display of judicial force that crowned a trend years in the making. Brazil's Supreme Court has dramatically expanded its power to counter the anti-democratic stances of Mr. Bolsonaro and his supporters. In the process, according to experts in law and government, the court has taken its own repressive turn. Now, again, it's amazing that it's the New York Times saying that what is repressive.
New York Times, I guess, is now a right-wing fascist organization. Anyways, one more.
In Brazil is not even so much the Bolsonaro government or the supporters of it, but even more repressive, they say, is the repression of the single judge on this Supreme Court in acting against what he considers dangerous speech. Quote, Mr. Moraes, the judge, has jailed 5 people without a trial for posts on social media that he has said attack Brazil's institutions. Let me read this again. Listen to this. This is what's coming to your country. Quote.
Exactly. This is what, remember, we have these Bill C-11, which thankfully has been watered down, but we see this encroachment continuing in our government, or these attempts at encroachment continuing in Canada, right? But a little bit more and we'll finish.
Mr. Moraes has jailed 5 people without a trial for posts on social media that he said attack Brazilian institutions. He didn't order them censored, he ordered them jailed with no trial. So do you see why I say that in my entire career as a journalist, the only time I've ever wondered to myself, should I really be questioning or challenging or critiquing this political official, is this person who has gone so far that he's willing to order people imprisoned without a trial for criticizing him? The New York Times goes on, quote, he has also ordered social networks to remove thousands of posts and videos with little room for appeal. And this year, 10 of the court's 11 justices sentenced a congressman to nearly 9 years in prison for making what they said were threats against them in a live stream. Political leaders on the left, listen to this, political leaders on the left and much of the Brazilian press and public have largely supported Mr. Moraes' actions as necessary measures to counter the singular threat posed by Bolsonaro.
So I think you can see, I mean, there's much more of that. I can post the link in the description of the video when I'm done. I got to run off to a meeting and got to be there in 13 minutes, but you get the idea. And this is a perfect example when people talk about, the political left. We're not talking, hippies from the 1960s anymore. Those people are in the conservative camps now. That's why we've all come to either they've abandoned political parties entirely. You've seen a lot of that. People that I know who are more liberal-leaning have done that. Or they're going over into more conservative-type parties and saying, yeah, maybe I don't like some of the conservatism on certain issues, but you know what I like? I like my freedom. And I like not to be harassed by the government. And, Brazil is another test bed, I think, is what we're seeing. It's really crazy what's going on there. Sounds like 4 Coots men in prison for almost a year now. Exactly. So it's really, when I talk about we're heading the golden era, but there's going to be bumps in the road, well, these are the bumps in the road that we all have to navigate. And this is why it's important for us to unify, and to unify, again, on these basic principles. Speaking of unification, so there's that, have you thought about that Freedom Convoy sabotage? We haven't spoken about that for quite a while. And the last time we spoke about it, I think, was before even Bridget and some of you were even watching my stream. How, when I asked the question many times and I gave certain, things that we knew about the Freedom Convoy, and was it sabotaged as well? I think you're going to see a lot of things coming out in 2003 related to this topic. My spidey senses tell me that there are some things coming down the pipeline. And this is why it's also important you're going to see all these organizations these proxy organizations looking for buy-in. They'll come out of nowhere. There'll be either new media companies, new media websites, not companies or websites, or XXX Freedom Group or whatever, Freedom for this for freedom, whatever. You're going to see a lot of these sort of organizations, which are proxy organizations for the political class, designed to manipulate you and to try to sow division and to talk about people who have participated in the Freedom Convoy negatively, trying to put you into the conservative versus liberal camp. I'm obviously no fan of blackface, as I've seen many times here, but it doesn't help us all allow us to be pushed into these silos. So there's nothing but friction and division amongst us. And we see a lot of this, just unify, you should just unify. And some of the people who say that, there'll be people who were the ones who sabotaged us sometimes. And, I like this analogy. Somebody told me this the other day. I can't remember who it was, but apparently this came from Boardman. That, let's unify. Well, so I'm the Canadian military, and I have a mole from the Chinese CCP or PLA, whatever you want to call them. You know what? I'm not going to unify with a mole on the inside. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to extricate them. I'm going to get rid of them, and then the rest of us can unify. That's the stage we're in right now, where that's why I've been open and speaking about things since the convoy, and you're starting to see on Twitter some of the other convoy leaders, road captains, people participated, have joined Twitter and are speaking up about some of this stuff. Bridget is one of them. Chad is there. Chris Guerra is there. Joe Jensen is there. There's a reason they're speaking openly. It's because you cannot unify with saboteurs amongst us. And that includes not just individuals, but fake organizations that are used just to deflect responsibility and to move all of you into one group to attack others. That's the game that's going to be going on through a lot of 2023. It's just it's a common political strategy that's used in Canada. So just be aware of that, right? Be aware of people. I try to limit. There's a couple of people I've been very vocal on, as you know, who were, they weren't even the ones they're just Muppets, which is my, I call them Muppet organizations or Muppet individuals. They're just, an advanced form of puppet who are working for people, and they're being told what to say. The people that I've criticized, that's exactly what they are. You'll see some of the Muppets attack me. They'll say, Dichter ran, or Dichter stole this, or Dichter did that. Those are the Muppets. They're getting their talking points from the political class that's trying to divide all of us, and that's why they're trying to do it. Because God forbid, what would happen if everybody ignored them and we all came and actually supported each other and worked to each other? Despite our differences in political ideas, political values, whatever, okay, we're always going to have, all of us will have difference. My best friends and I have difference on politics and family. That's always going to happen. Imagine we all come together and say, you know what? You know what the enemy is? The enemy is the political class. Those corrupt mofos, they're the enemy, right? The people who froze the bank accounts and the people who worked with those who froze the bank accounts, those are the enemies. That's what needs to be purged, right? So if we all kind of just dropped all the name-calling nonsense that the political class is fueling the Muppets with, and just dropped it, and everybody just kind of focused on, hey, we got to kind of need to stick together just to retain our basic sovereignty and freedoms, then you know what? We're going to get a lot better ahead. That's what I've been doing with some of the others, with Bridget and Chad. And we have differences in opinion, different agreements, different perspectives and stuff. But okay, that's okay, right? What's important is that we all let's focus on the real target, and the real target are those who conspired to sabotage us or those who conspired to sabotage the country with these mandates and the ArriveCan app and have farmed out so much of our country to foreign entities, right? So, anyways, it is what it is. No, Donna, that's part of the infrastructure. That's part of the distraction, which is why he didn't run for the actual opposition party. He went to a new party because he's on the payroll as well. I'm not going to post it because I don't want to get in fights with people, but that's just the reality. That's when you see a lot of overly theatric games. That is designed to emotionally this is persuasion marketing 101. You try to emotionally manipulate a large group of people around one issue. You build an artificial hero. You, what's it called? You build a movement around a character, and that's how you can subdivide your voting base, and you can keep everybody separate. And that's why, but anyways, I'm not going to get more into that. Cheryl, I'm so happy I found all of you. You guys are all awesome. Your YouTube feed is breaking down. I guess that means it's time for me to leave, right? I actually have to run. I have to be to a meeting in 4 minutes. So and it's not here. So I got to go put my jacket on, get in my car, and head down there. But I love you all. I promised all of you I will never BS you. I will tell you the truth. And sometimes it's uncomfortable. Donna, as an example, I apologize if it's that sort of stuff is a little bit uncomfortable, but it is what it is. It's the truth. So I got to run. Oh, if you watch it in a replay, it'll be smooth. That's just kind of how YouTube's codecs work. But anyways, I got to run. I love you all. Stay positive. Stay peaceful. There's so much more that's coming down the pipeline. We have barely even started. And it's going to get spicy. I told you people are going to be attacking me, and those attacks are going to go into overdrive. I can pretty much guarantee that at this point. So, but I love you all. And Jesse, everybody, thanks. I don't mean to cut it short, but I didn't realize the time. I got to run. I'll talk to you soon.